in the intersect remaining 2 days. This is the nature of the beast. This is a photograph taken in Boston, the US, Boston, the United States, and this is the first attack by a crew of Boston firefighters on a wooden structure of some 3 floors. The major problem in modern firefighting is something called a flashover, and there is also a thing called a backdraft, but I'm not going to explain the differences between that here tonight. Basic meaning and equipment and competency is all about preventing. And these US firemen have opened this building up, and it's a scientific phenomenon, a flashover. The camera has caught that, and sadly that regularly around the world does take the lives of a number of firefighters and also cause some serious injuries, and that's what we train to avoid. This is a very old photograph from 1959 in Manchester. This is still a hazard here. You can begin to see that this is a building that is, I don't know if you can see my laser light, it's a small department store in central Manchester. It's been very severely affected by fire. The floors have fallen away. It's an unstable structure, and this tons of masonry is coming down, and you probably can't see that from a very indistinct photograph, but these firefighters are I think attempting a world record 100 metres record to get away from it. This is a photograph taken on a mobile phone of a rescue about 5 years ago in London Fire Brigade. In the upper floors of a hotel in central London where over 30 rescues were made by firefighters. You can see the smoke, which is always the problem. It's smoke that kills in fires, not the real fire. Smoke just asphyxiates its victims. This is a very modern photograph of the deployment of some pumping appliances and an aerial ladder in East London at a medium-sized fire. Good firefighting strategy and tactics in operation there, which I hope Tony will agree with me, even though it's my old brigade. This is also another recent London fire. Lunchtime in the summer of 2012. It's a university, a very historic university right in the city of London. It had the decorators in, painting and burning some paint off, and that's the result. The fire spread right along the roof and indeed was stopped at the central clock tower by the efforts of a lot of firefighters. Now, the challenge today, particularly in this part of the world, is fires in high-rise buildings and in major multi-size complexes like the Dubai Shopping Mall and other many shopping malls in the Gulf. And again, fire spread can never be predicted. This is a building, domestic apartments in central London from the 1960s, where probably the design of the fire engineering wasn't quite what we would do today, but the fire has started. Oops. Come back. That is the fire burning actually in the lower floor, which you can see where the fire has started here. It's jumped internally to the next floor, and then it's gone right the way up the staircase to the roof. And sadly there were 6 fatalities there for London firefighters to deal with, although they did rescue quite a lot of people during the daytime, including mothers with children. This is much closer at home. This is Fortune Towers, just in the final stages of construction down on the West Marina 3 years ago. And it's bad housekeeping. There are a lot of finishing products, windows and double glazing stored at the top, and some of the construction workers were having a lunch, and we think it was a careless cigarette, went into some rubbish, and that is the result, and 2 of those workers sadly jumped to 35 floors, and Dubai Civil Defence quite a nasty job. This is another high-rise fire from London. I'll skip over it because you're getting the general drift of fires in high-rise now. This is another block of flats in South London 3 years ago. You can see the volume of smoke, can't you? And this is one in Sharjah last year that some of you will remember, where the problem was flammable cladding panels on the external faces of the building. So that when the fire started, at this sort of level, if my laser light will work properly, it spread right the way up to the top. And how there were no fatalities in that particular fire in the middle of the afternoon on a Thursday, I shall never know. I think Tony is going to talk a little bit about the Unified Fire Code in due course, but the challenge here is really to do with these external flammable panels, which are, even recently in the Tamil Towers fire, the cause of what was potentially a fire disaster. This is another one from Europe this time. This is in the centre of Madrid in Spain. It's a tower block from the 1970s under reconstruction and refurbishment. And again, carelessness on the part of the construction contractors led to a fire at the lower level that went right the way through the structure to create a total loss for the insurance world to pick up. Fires down here in the industrial sector are just as important to protect against with good technology. This is a major fire in the Leeds city area of the United Kingdom 5 years ago. This was in a chemical storage plant, and the smoke was so toxic for 48 hours downwind that it shut down part of the city of Leeds and the business that was going on there. And even 15 and 20 miles away, the smoke plume was so toxic that whole crops and vegetables had to be condemned. That's the sort of problem with uncontrolled fire these days. This is a very large plastics fire in the ICI complex in the UK, again about 3 years ago, and actually caused a shortage of plastic products in the UK for a very short time. And this is in the middle of the summer on a sunny day, and that smoke is again very toxic. A huge job for 200 firefighters at the scene. It went on for about 40 hours. And this is the sort of collateral damage you've got on major structures that don't have the proper fire protection. This is a typical unprotected structural steel structure that has not got protection for the structural steel, which weakens very quickly if it's not protected in a serious fire with a complete collapse like that. That was an office block in London about 10 years ago, but it illustrates the point. Even fires out in the open can be a problem. This is a mobile crane on one of our motorways. It had a brake fire that overheated and it spread into one of the tyres and all the 12 axles on this vehicle. And look at the smoke that's making. And motorists behind it have actually stopped. Fortunately, this is before the arrival of the first emergency services on the scene. And ship fires are a problem too, because when you're at sea, you've got to protect the metal structure of the ship. And these are some examples of some relatively recent freighter fires. That was just off the UK. This was a very large tanker fire in the English Channel. And this was a most recent one, just coming into the Gulf of Hormuz. It's a container ship coming up to the Suez Canal to go through to Rotterdam. And it had an undisclosed part cargo of Chinese fireworks on board, along with a lot of flammables. And this photograph was taken after the crew of a abandoned ship, and the ship is drifting out of control. It's a 150,000 ton container ship, as you can see, and in a busy shipping lane. And fortunately, a salvage crew, assisted by the Dutch Navy and a firefighting team, went on board to take control and put the fire out. I've just thrown in, just in conclusion, a few non-fire incidents which today's fire brigades and civil defences have to deal with. Lots and lots of injuries and incidents and emergencies with car accidents. And here's one that's overturned, and the medical team are working with the fire service to deal with the casualty, stabilising before getting it out. This was a very serious accident to a BMW that hit a wall at great speed in Frankfurt. Another accident on one of London's motorways involving a multiple collision. Another one near Birmingham on a motorway where a major load shifted this. So the large girder on the left was on a mobile trailer, a 50-ton load, and it moved and swung across the westbound carriageway, catching 3 cars. Fortunately, no fatalities. Another lorry crash in Frankfurt, and rescues from things like the effects of wild weather. This was a child and his parent caught on some mud with the tide coming in, and you can see the child rescued here through new technology, the sort that Sofeco have got. These are inflatable air mats that enable rescuers to go out onto the mud to bring people trapped in. And currently in the UK, you may have read, we've had an awful lot of very, very wet weather and flooding. The problem for the fire departments is to get rid of the water. So imagine clearing that one up after some days of pumping. Coming back to dealing with fire, these are firefighters around the world at training. You can never train enough, because when it happens at 3 o'clock in the morning, the equipment has got to work every time. And that's the importance of what Sofeco produces through its new technology and the certifications that go with it. You only get one chance as a firefighter when something's going wrong in the early hours of the morning. And all this practice of imaginary fires and simulated fires. And here you see a breathing apparatus crew just about to go into some cosmetic smoke to go through their safety procedures when they're working blind in smoke, looking for casualties and looking at the seat of the fire. This is a nice photograph. Without smoke, you have to imagine in the real world this would be full of smoke. This trainee would not see where he's going. As a member of London Fire Brigade going through what is affectionately known as the Rat Run. It's a great obstacle course that would test the commandos of this world. But that's what regular firefighter training is all about. And bringing it back more home to Sofeco and their extinguisher range, here is an instructor showing very, very good practice use of a dry powder extinguisher on a large open tray of burning fuel. This is another training fire, believe it or not. This is a release of LPG gas to recruit firefighters to learn to deal, to get close to and put up a water spray. You can't quite see it because it's the water spray that's protecting them from radiated heat is evaporating quickly with the heat of the fire. This is another training fire showing a team of recruit firefighters working as a team using the water spray to drive the fire down so they can get to the shut-off valve and isolate the valve that is leaking fuel and is burning, say, in a refinery or a gas storage plant. It's a very, very realistic scene. And believe me, it encourages confidence in your equipment, as you can see here. The instructors are with them, taking very, very slowly under the cover of a very, very highly atomised water spray. And this is another dramatic photograph in training. These actually are some firefighters from Dubai Civil Defence who were in the UK last year. And here they've got a fire screen burning liquid petroleum gas. And again, it's the same drill. You can see how protective that mushroom water spray is. That they're driving forward slowly to get to the valve to shut down. And this shot is inside one of the modern computer-controlled fire training houses that actually creates a real-life situation and is under software computer control for safety. And you can probably see the base of the fire. It's a metal sofa to create a sofa fire, which is one of the regular causes of fire where they carelessly disposed a cigarette has been dropped into a flammable foam furniture. We couldn't put any more smoke in because you wouldn't see the fire. That can be really, really realistic and it creates a very hot, humid and physical atmosphere for firefighters to train in. At the very, very moment, at 3 o'clock in the morning, life is on the line. Just to go right. This is a lot of work that firefighters do in preparation for, sadly, terrorist attacks these days. This is part of a drill in London Fire Brigade preparing for a chemical attack on the London Underground, the London Metro. This is going on at 3 o'clock in the morning at a weekend, so we're not disturbing the City of London too much. And this is a rescue of an injured worker on a very high crane in Stuttgart, where they're lowering the casualty, who is only a dummy, to a lower level so he can receive attention. And as we come to the end now, before I hand over to Tony at last, it says, this was Dubai Civil Defence demonstrating their abseiling skills in breathing apparatus from one of their helicopters about 3 years ago. And this is very much a show-off German firefighter who wants to wave goodbye to the photographer at a fair number of floors up. He looks very comfortable. but I'm not too sure about that, especially not at my age. And a few quick views of something that Sofico are very much involved in. These are European fire trucks, but this is a small fire in an oil refinery in the northwest of England. These you'll be familiar with. These are aerial ladder platforms from Dubai. This is a row of British heavy-duty multi-purpose vehicles going out to various fire brigades. I think, Tony, this was one of yours, was it not? I think, so you can talk a little bit about that. And we conclude with the old enemy. It's always there. This is taken in the outskirts of Leeds. It's an empty warehouse. And this photograph was taken by the brigade photographer 7 minutes after the arrival of the first pumps. That building is what we call well alight. The job there is to protect the surrounding risk and make sure it doesn't spread to surrounding properties. Just imagine heat coming off this woodyard fire. It's an open air fire. You don't need breathing apparatus, but there is intense heat there where equipment, the personal protection of the firefighters, as well as their equipment, their hose, their pumps, is paramount. And finally, the men and women who make it all work. We have an increasing number of female firefighters in Europe these days, and here's a mixed team from central London posing for the camera. We also have a sad number of deliberately lit fires in Europe, growing trend, insurance fraud, and dogs are very, very good with their sensors to detect accelerants and so on. And finally, this is a studio portrait, it's not a real fire. I think the brigade who did this photograph had a great deal of trouble getting the little girl to look unhappy. She could have ice cream and sweets up to them. But it makes the point that firefighting and what Sofico provides with their technology, their heritage, is all about supporting the teams in the front line when all the systems are fail, and sadly occasionally through human carelessness they do. And I'm not saying we should go horse-drawn for the fire. That's how we did it in the UK about 120 years ago, and we've still got a few of those that we bring out on special days. So thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to my very good colleague, who is a much more recently retired chief, Tony McGurk, who is chief of Merseyside, which is the area, for those of you who follow Premiership football, is where Liverpool and Everton eyeball to eyeball quite regularly. I'm not too sure which team Tony supports, but that's the area